all worry about what Hamas might do in regards to trying to... Hold on, let me finish the point. Let me finish the point.
Hamas showed what they do on October the 7th, and its leadership, as I'm sure you very well know, said that they would like to repeat that until they have got rid of every Jew.
We've got all of these dead babies that this monster doesn't care about. He says keep bombing them.
I only write for all the main newspapers.
We fight for... Shut up.
Leave your bedroom sometime and come to this region and see it for yourself.
Hey, I thought I was supposed to get the last word, and this idiot's talking about bedrooms.
I think we actually had a very...
little man.
I found
You're
it
super evil. You don't mind the deaths of all those thousands of people.
Let's not
evil
descend...
warmongering.
Damn, this thing got real heated. Welcome back to One and Done. Tonight we're going to be looking at Piers Morgan Uncensored, and his guests are Douglas Murray and Cenk Uygur. Now, Douglas and Cenk have completely opposing points of view on the Palestinian and Israel conflict. Now, I am not going to pretend for a minute that I'm an expert or know... Actually, I know very little about this conflict. All I know is that there's no winners in wars, and there's only losers. One loses more than the other. So without delay, let's jump in and roll the tape.
Well, I'm now joined by the author of The War on the West, Douglas Murray, and by Young Turks founder and Democratic presidential challenger, Cenk Uygur. It seems that in the last few days, there have been a number of incidents which really question whether Israel is being precise, as it says it is, or indiscriminate. And I would cite the killing of the 3 hostages. I would cite the killing of the 2 women outside the Catholic Church. I would cite the President of the United States saying that they're...
Sorry to interrupt, but like, how long are Pierce's questions? They seem to go on forever.
Using indiscriminate bombing and so on. Do you, Douglas, notwithstanding your full throttle support of Israel, does anything that's been happening make you think Israel needs to execute this war differently?
No, and I think that most of the people who think they know how to execute this war have never executed a war. Indeed, most people who think they know how the IDF should be running this conflict have never been near a conflict. I'm in Israel tonight. I was in Gaza again yesterday. And the examples that you give, by the way, Piers, I don't see why they show any need to prosecute the war itself differently. I mean, just to take one of them, the first example you give, the absolutely tragic, awful shooting of these 3 hostages as they were coming out. But, you know, some of the spin that's been put on that in the world, apart from the glee, of course, that Israel's enemies can't help expressing, some of the spin on that is almost as if it shows the IDF is sort of so brutal that it even kills Hamas hostages who are Israeli. I just think this is another example of the international media and others just having this astounding lack of empathy for the Israeli people. Can you imagine what it was like for those soldiers who were in Gaza, knowing that at any point there were snipers, there are booby traps everywhere, people coming out of tunnels that they've built at British and American taxpayer expenses and attacking them? Can you imagine what it was like for the soldiers who, in that terrible moment, made the life-changing mistake of shooting 3 people who turned out to be Hamas hostages?
But why would they, but Douglas, on that, why would they shoot anyone who was shirtless and waving an SOS flag? I mean, why would whoever they were, whether they were Israeli hostages or whether they thought they were Palestinians, why would anyone shoot anyone who comes out like that? That's my point.
I mean, these questions seem straightforward, and they, you know, you sort of expect an answer, but when you're in war, it's war. You know, a lot of norms go out the window. You're under pressure. Everyone's a threat. It's very easy to be sitting in your, you know, the comfort of your studio and making these accusations. It's interesting.
That'll be a matter for the inquiry into it. But, you know, look, it's hardly as if they'd have wanted to have done that. What this demonstrates is, in this incredibly close conflict in a heavily built-up area, people coming out from all sides, firing, shooting, detonating, people make mistakes. Of course they do. That's just a human reality of war, horrible as it is. I don't think it shows in any way that Israel is prosecuting this war wrongly. As for the main issue of the war is to destroy Hamas. No Israeli of left or right or center believes anymore after October the 7th they can live beside Hamas. Hamas has been given the statelet of Gaza. It was given it in 2006, voted in, then killed their fellow Palestinians in a coup, killed Fatah rivals. And they've run the Gaza for almost 18 years now. And they've produced a new generation of people whose main aim in life, it seems, according to their textbooks and their classes, is to regard Jews as enemies who should be killed. This is just an unbelievable waste, a waste of life on every side. But apart from anything else, a waste of those Palestinian lives, of children who grew up under Hamas's rule, if you can call it that, who have been indoctrinated into becoming sociopaths by a psychopathic terror organization, Hamas.
This is why I guess freedom of speech is super important. Like, for example, if he has examples of that, why can't he show them on air? It's because the mainstream media and the censor prophets want to control everything that we see. We don't know if what Douglas is saying is true. We don't know if it's false. This is why we need to see the information to judge for ourselves. And you'll never get to the heart of the issues and problems if we don't actually see everything laid out before us.
Yes.
All right. Cenk, you've been listening to that. Is there anything that Douglas said that you agree with?
No, nothing.
Not even about the way Hamas has presided over Gaza in the last 18 years?
Yeah. So that's a weapon of mass distraction. It's Israel doing genocide on the Palestinians right now. And there's IDF soldiers singing and in video that the IDF has confirmed about how they're going to wipe out the seed of Amalek. That is a verse in the old Hebrew Bible that talks about exterminating Amalek. So they're talking about genocide against Palestinians. Benjamin Netanyahu has also talked about wiping out Amalek. These are open calls for genocide. What I find stunning, Douglas mentioned stunning lack of empathy. There's 20,000 dead people in Palestine right now in Gaza. Over 8,000 of them are children. When 36 Israeli children were killed by Hamas, the world cried out, and I was brokenhearted over it. 36 poor kids dead in Israel. Now there's over 8,000 dead kids in Gaza. You want to talk about a stunning lack of empathy. 6,400 women slaughtered in Gaza. You want to talk about terrorism? They're dropping unguided bombs, 2,000-pound bombs. Every one of those bombs is an act of terrorism. And the stunning lack of empathy towards Palestinian lives is disgusting. But I want to be clear, it is not shared by all Israelis. The dad of one of the hostages who was killed went on Israeli television and said, "Stop killing them." And he didn't mean the hostages. He meant the Palestinians.
All right, but Cenk, let me just jump in. But before I go back to Douglas' response to this.
Let me reply to that, Piers.
Yeah, I will let you reply to that. On this issue of genocide, do you accept, though, that Hamas's whole raison d'etre when it comes to Israel is genocide? They want to eradicate Israel and kill as many Jews as they can. I mean, they've made no secret of this.
All right. Someone let me know in the comments, because I've got friends on both sides. I've probably got more Muslim friends than I have Jewish friends, or people that are, fall on the Jewish side. Is this true? Is this what they want to do? Do they want to get rid of the Jewish people so that they can have that land? Because it's either true or false. And it keeps getting reported. And depending which side you're going to lend your ear to, you are definitely going to get a different perspective. So just be interesting to get your thoughts in the comments.
Yeah. So this is really important. So I have no sympathy for Hamas. So I am not interested in defending Hamas. I think that's nothing but a distraction, because right now they're not fighting Hamas. They're just killing Palestinian civilians.
Well, they're also killing Hamas terrorists. They are. I mean, they're killing thousands of them.
Barely. No, wait a minute. Barely. But let's go to your main point, okay? So the main point is, well, Hamas threatens X, Y, and Z and has killed 1,200 people on October 7th. So that is why we have to all worry about what Hamas might do in regards to trying to... Hold on, let me finish the point. Let me finish the point. Let me finish the point.
And I knew Pierce was going to jump in. He can't help himself. Let's see what Jake's point is.
And what they might do if they had infinite power, the kind of power that Israel has. Meanwhile, Israel is actually doing the genocide, is actually preventing a Palestinian state and saying you are not allowed to exist. And if you dare try to exist, we'll kill 20,000 of your children and women.
All right, Douglas, respond to that.
Several things. First of all, anyone who uses the term genocide in this context simply doesn't know what they're talking about, or is a malevolent actor. I don't know if Mr. Uyghur's traveled at all in his life, how far he's traveled, how many conflicts he's seen, but I'd have guessed none. And you clearly know nothing about this particular conflict, and you've obviously seen none of it. The genocide that you describe is such a smear and a libel against the Jewish state. If Israel wanted to commit genocide, I'm sure it could, but it doesn't. It doesn't remotely want to. And people like you and other pro-Palestinian propagandists have spent years claiming that Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza. By the way, the weirdest thing about this claim is that the population of the Gaza has grown by 1 million in the last 15 or so years. So if Israel was trying to carry out a genocide, it's either the worst perpetrator of genocide ever or uniquely poor at performing that task. None of the stats support that ridiculous claim. And it's such a weird smear and a libel of Israel. Secondly, of course, you've just rattled off Hamas figures, as everyone of your kind always does. Thirdly, you said that the world cried, you said that the people like you who cover for the Palestinian extremists. Thirdly, you said that the world cried out for the 36 Israeli dead children. No, they didn't. And you know that very well. You know that very well. If you put up a poster to a missing dog in any Western city, that poster stays up. In city after city in America, posters of abducted Jewish children, including a 10-month-old baby, were put up and were ripped down by people who have been indoctrinated into hate of Jews. Nobody would rip down the poster of a missing dog, but from Dublin to Berkeley, they ripped down posters of abducted Jewish children. So no, I don't think there was very much care for that around the world.
Let me put this to you, Douglas.
Is that an offence? Is that like a criminal offence if you rip, if you rip posters down and things like that? It is bizarre. I'm not sure why you would want to do that.
Let me make two other very quick points. Firstly, you said what Hamas might do, as if it was some kind of hypothetical. Hamas showed what they do, what they want to do. It showed it on October the 7th, and its leadership, as I'm sure you very well know, said that they would like to repeat that again and again until they have got rid of every Jew. So, I don't know. I would trust Hamas's word on that rather than your interpretation of what you think they mean when they say that, and your generous interpretation of what you think that means. And finally, as for preventing a Palestinian state, it is nonsense that the Israelis have prevented a Palestinian state. They gave the Gazans a Palestinian state in 2005. They gave them a Palestinian state in 2005 when every Jewish person was ripped from their homes in the Gaza by IDF soldiers. And the Palestinian people were given a state. And what did they do? They voted in Hamas, who then killed their fellow Palestinians, never had another election, and used all the billions of dollars of taxpayer funds from the US, UK, and Europe to build terror tunnels and to enrich themselves so they could live the life of luxury in Qatar. Again and again, the reason there is not a Palestinian state is because the Palestinian leadership doesn't want one.
Okay, Douglas,
didn't want one in 1947. It preferred war, and it doesn't want one now.
Douglas, let me put one point to you raised by Queen Rania of Jordan in a new piece for, I think it was the Washington Post. In just over 2 months, she said Israel's turned Gaza into a hellscape. At least 8,000 children have died, more than the death tolls of Pearl Harbor, September the 11th, and Hurricane Katrina combined. But these are gigantic and horrendous numbers of children being killed. Do you not have any qualms about the number of children being killed? I mean, does it not suggest that Israel?
I want to hear Queen Rania talking about this as much as I want to hear Queen Camilla or Meghan Markle. I mean, it's pathetic. Queen Rania is holding on to her own position in Jordan. The only piece of advice she has for anyone is how to marry a king. Queen Rania herself is just playing a very nasty political game. If she cared at all, and I would pose this to all the states in the region, if Jordan cared at all for the Palestinian people, they would take them in.
So the conversation so far has been reasonably civil. I can see that Douglas Murray is starting to get a little bit frustrated. And this is the most well-behaved I've ever seen Cenk Uygur on camera. It's going to be very interesting to see if this continues. Let's see.
If she cared at all, and I would pose this to all the states in the region, if Jordan cared at all for the Palestinian people, they would take them in. They would take them in. They don't want them. If the Egyptians wanted them, they'd take them in, but they don't. Do you know why? Because every country that takes in the Palestinians gets terror. It happened in Egypt, it happened in Jordan, it happened in Syria, it happened in Lebanon, it happened in Tunisia, on and on. That's why these people don't really care about their fellow Muslims. They just care about hating Jews.
All right, Cenk, your response.
Ooh. Yeah, so you asked if he cared about 8,000 dead babies, and his answer was no. Queen Rania bothers me, so complete non-answer, because he doesn't care. He doesn't think that Palestinians' lives are worth anything.
Now, this is the Cenk I know.
Just called them all terrorists.
Well, it's nice you can put that
and this is what they always do.
There you go.
So hold on, I let you talk for a long time, so why don't you shut up for a second?
Oh.
So we've got all of these dead babies. We've got all of these dead babies that this monster doesn't care about. He says keep bombing them. A former intelligence officer said in the Israeli press they're using AI in a program called The Gospel, where he said it's basically a mass assassination factory. And we could all see it with our own eyes. And you can do all the propaganda you want. No one believes your nonsense. We see all the dead women. We see all the dead children. Now Israel has killed 20 times the number of civilians that Hamas killed. So would I want Hamas in charge of Israel? Never, never. I don't trust them, and I don't believe that they would be benign. So all of this propaganda about, people don't mind Hamas. No, we mind Hamas. We terribly what happened on October 7th. And I've now shown you different Israelis that have said that it's a problem. And I want peace and security for both Israel and Palestine. And this does not get Israel any peace or security.
And I think if there's one thing they seem to have a consensus on is Hamas. Hamas sounds like they're not the best option for the Palestinians. And it's really going to be up to the Palestinians to get rid of Hamas. Now, that sounds a lot easier than the reality would be, because they haven't had elections for about 12 years, I believe. So Hamas were actually democratically elected, but they haven't had elections ever since. Now, if Hamas are these terrorists that they're claiming that they are, I'm guessing that'll be quite difficult to put someone else on the ballot and, live to tell the tale. And it's absolutely horrific and terrible that we've got this loss of lives of women and children and men. This is war.
But when you ask the other side, do you mind tens of thousands of civilians that have been murdered, incinerated alive, body parts picked out of rubble, little babies killed over and over again in what is even the Israeli prime minister is referring to as Amalek, meaning an extermination of the Palestinian people. And I must clarify the difference between a genocide and a Holocaust. A genocide is when you target a specific people and kill a lot of civilians. Srebrenica, where 6,000 people were killed, was considered a genocide. So it doesn't mean you try to murder every single person in that
let me ask
race.
You.
That is a Holocaust.
Okay,
let me reply.
Wait, one second. Before I go to Douglas, Cenk, one question. You want to get rid of Hamas too, as does Douglas, as do I. If you don't do it the way that Israel is currently doing it, given that they live amongst the population, how else do you do it?
Yeah, there's an excellent way to do it, and there's the right way to do it. So let me explain. So war, this guy talks about, I love war. I go to all the conflict zones. So by watching it and rooting on for more death, I know something about conflict. You know nothing. So here's what reality is. War gets you more war, but peace actually works. So when Israel did a peace deal with Egypt, not only were the Egyptians safe, but the Israelis became safer. That peace deal has held for decade after decade. So how do you do a peace deal in this case?
Now, wait on. So they were able to successfully do a peace deal. So it proves to a certain extent that the Israelis are capable of doing peace deals. So how come they can't do a peace deal with Hamas or Palestine? Now, apparently they've made several attempts to make peace deals.
What you do is you do the two-state solution now, and you do it with the Palestinian Authority in the West Bank. And if you then have a Palestinian state, the Palestinian Authority would have the credibility to drive out Hamas from Gaza. That is a realistic plan for both peace, security for Israel and the Palestinians, and driving out Hamas. The idea that you're going to kill 20,000 more civilians, 200,000 more civilians in Gaza, and it's going to drive out Hamas.
Okay, let Douglas
Let me answer that.
Let Douglas respond to that.
First of all, I mean, your other guest, I mean, I don't know what kind of a creature he is. He's a kind of low-grade thug, as far as I can see. He's listened to nothing I've said.
Yeah, I know, because I'm Muslim. That's what you call all Muslims.
I'll tell you. No, it's not that at all. It's not that at all. I just think that I think you're just a very low-rent racist. But anyway, let me just get on to it. You say first of all, I don't care about the death of Palestinian children. Yes, I do care. I care very deeply about it. But I also know that the responsibility for their deaths lies on Hamas, which has misgoverned their society for the last 16 years and now has been leading the country into being in a war with Israel. So yes, it's on Hamas this. As for seeing wars, by the way, I just mentioned about seeing wars because as far as I can see, you're very ill-traveled as well as rather ill-lettered and ill-spoken. And I mention that I cover wars and go to wars because I happen to think myself that it's worth seeing things with your own eyes, including things that you don't particularly like, but you report the truth. I don't know if you ever even leave your own bedroom. And I can tell already that you don't because you've already said something that demonstrates you know nothing about this conflict. You have just demonstrated it in the following terms. You said that this is why we need to push for a two-state solution and give legitimacy to the Palestinian Authority. I'll tell you something you don't know, because I guess you spent no time in the West Bank, have you? To the Palestinian Authority. I'll tell you something you don't know, because I guess you spent no time in the West Bank, have you? I'll tell you something you probably don't know. The Palestinian Authority, Fatah, celebrated the 7th of October massacres. I'll give you another fact which demonstrates you know nothing about this and clearly haven't ever visited any Palestinians in the West Bank as I have. If there was an election tomorrow in the West Bank, the reason why there isn't one is because if there was an election tomorrow in the West Bank, Hamas would win. So your idea of a two-state solution, I'm afraid you are so out of date and you really should leave your bedroom. Because in this region, nobody thinks that there is a two-state solution on the table because there is not a viable negotiating partner. But I just want to make one other main point. You have gone on and on tonight, throwing accusations out against the Jewish state, against me. It's the sort of thing you do. I know you're a sort of online pugilist and think you can run for office, and good luck with that. But I'd just like to point out that you only really get animated if the Jews are involved. And I can tell that for the following reason. I mean, your surname's Uyghur, isn't it? 1 million Uyghur Muslims in China have been put in concentration camps in the last decade. And people of your ilk never really care about that, do you? Because it's not the Jews doing it, it's the Chinese Communist Party. At the moment, 1 million people who are in Pakistan at the moment, who are your fellow Muslims and who happen to be Afghan, and I don't think you care about them, do you? 1 million Afghans are currently being forcibly deported from Pakistan to Afghanistan. You don't care about that. You're not riled up about that. You're not riled up about what the Janjaweed are currently doing in Sudan, where thousands and thousands of people are being attacked by the Islamist militia there. You don't care about any of that. You get exercised and you rile up what little base you have of malcontents because you're riled up when the Jews do anything.
All right,
it's
Cenk.
perfectly obvious.
Okay.
Now, Douglas Murray is absolutely called Cenk out here. There's so many other things that he could be voicing his concerns about. Now, to be fair to Cenk, what they're talking about here is the Israeli and Palestine conflict. So whilst everything else he has mentioned is obviously important, what I want to see next, however, is what Cenk has as a solution, because he hasn't really come up with a solution. He says peace works. Okay. But how do you get there? How do you get to peace? And that's what he didn't really articulate. He said that Israel has made peace agreements with Egypt and other countries. Okay, great. But how does that help Palestine and Israel today? What can they learn from those agreements? Anyway, I'm sure Cenk is going to come back with something. Let's check it out.
Cenk, your response.
Yeah. Okay, first of all, my last name is Uyghur. We're named after the Uyghur Turks in China. And have we talked about that on the Young Turks?
Spoken up then.
Yes. Yes, we've talked about it endlessly, but you don't know that, and you don't watch the show.
Shame
you just
nobody
make
watches
things
your
up.
show.
So
Nobody does watch your show.
Yeah, well, okay, again, you're interrupting me when I was kind enough to let you go on with your mad ramblings. So how nobody watches the show, we have 5 billion views a year. I don't know what piddling outfit you're on, or what little Substack or whatever the hell you write on. So the reason we're incredibly popular is we fight for shut up. We fight for all innocent civilians. So yes, we've covered all of those conflicts. Yes, I'm against fundamentalist Islam, no question about it.
I think Douglas Murray is probably, I think he's sort of winning this debate at the moment, but he is letting himself down with these ad hominem attacks, and then he's sort of lowering himself to Cenk's level, and Cenk has a reputation for ad hominem attacks, and I've seen a lot of Douglas Murray's debates, and I think he's at his best, at his finest, when he lets the other person, drown themselves. Let's see if the heat goes up.
I'm against fundamentalist religions of all kind. In terms of every right-wing supporter of Israel, their only tactic is, hey, don't look at the 8,000 murdered children. Don't look at the 6,400 murdered women. Don't look at the fact that all the hospitals in northern Gaza have been shut down. Don't look at the fact that 4 out of 5 people in northern Gaza are starving right now, and half of the people in southern Gaza are starving. Instead, anti-Semite. Now, wait a minute. I just told you how much I want peace and security for Israel, how much I hated what happened on October 7th. What you don't know is I started the Young Turks with 2 Jewish friends. And so the whole program is both Jews and Muslims. You know nothing. You know nothing. I have Jewish family and friends. Why in the world, God, as they go to Israel, I want them to be safe, okay? So I have shown empathy for all civilians throughout everything I have ever done. But all you have is hatred. Oh, he's an anti-Semite. Kill the Muslims. Kill the Palestinians. And once we kill them, by the way, we'll blame them for it. Israel had to murder all those babies in Palestine because Hamas made us do it. Then why are you listening to Hamas? Why are you letting Hamas drive your agenda? Well, you don't have to kill those civilians. It's a mass assassination factory.
We are, 9 weeks into this war. 20,000 people, according to the Hamas-run health authority, but the numbers have not been questioned by other official bodies. 20,000 people so far have died on the Palestinian side. And it is estimated from the IDF that they say they've killed 7,000 or so Hamas terrorists. That number's not been verified. But if you take that as being accurate, that's 20% of the estimated number of Hamas terrorists that exist. Therefore, there's 80% still to be eliminated, which at this rate would take another 8 to 10 months and would lead to potentially several 100,000 civilians being killed and pretty much all of Gaza being obliterated, with nowhere for the 2 million who've been displaced to go back to. So my question for you is, if this is the game plan by Israel to finish Hamas right to the last terrorist, what is left after that? They talk about the day after the war. What does it look like? Who runs Gaza? Where do these people go back to live? In other words, what actually happens if Israel is successful, however long it takes, in eliminating Hamas?
Well, first of all, I just have to add, you quite rightly said it, Piers, that the figures you gave are Hamas figures, and we do have to treat them with more than a grain of salt. As for, again, my counterpart here goes on about the deliberate genocide of children and women. I mean, I know, and this is the sort of thing I think you do. You sort of claim that there are bombs being deliberately dropped on children and old women. Why would Israel want to drop bombs deliberately on children or old women? I mean, it's just a shame you don't get out and see anything. The Israelis do an incredibly careful campaign before bombings to try to make sure that civilians are warned to leave areas that are about to be attacked. Everybody knows that. Everybody in the region knows that. It's a shame that fact hasn't got to you. As it happens, The whole question you raised, Piers, is a very, very complex one. I don't have the answer. I don't believe anyone does have the answer about the day after. Nobody wants to rule the Gaza. The Israelis used to be in charge of it. They left, as I say, in 2005 to the last Jew. They were all taken out of their houses. Israel doesn't want to rule the Gaza. Now, who can rule the Gaza? Hamas clearly cannot, because they set it up as a terrorist statelet. Can some Fatah-like authority be encouraged to take it over? Possibly. I spoke to one Palestinian analyst earlier today who said that actually, just as I said earlier, that an election in the West Bank today would elect Hamas, perhaps an election tomorrow, if it was to happen, and I'm not sure if that's going to be a good idea, might even actually elect not Hamas Palestinians to power. But it's a heck of a risk. The reality is that the only solution to Gaza that anyone can see, I can imagine, is that it has to be a solution which involves multiple players in the region. The question of the Gaza is a very complex question. It used to be ruled by Egypt, used to be run by Egypt. Can Egypt have a role? In my view, it has to have a role. Can Jordan be involved? In my view, yes, it has to have a role. Can the Gulf states, including those who've been pumping money to Hamas, have some kind of role? Yes, I would hope so. It cannot be Israel's task alone to deal with the question of the Gaza. It has to involve multiple players in the region. But there's one kicker to that, which is that none of the Arabs in this region that I'm sitting in care a jot about the Palestinians. They really do not. If they did, for all of their talk, they would have done something. They would not have decided to keep the Palestinians out, as they have in country after country. Queen Rania can invite the Gazans into Jordan. She can invite the West Bank Palestinians into Jordan. She doesn't. Egypt could open its border with Gaza. It doesn't. The Egyptian border with Gaza is firmer and more closely locked than the Israeli ones. There are Gazan workers who, until the atrocities of October the 7th, every day were going through the Eretz crossings and others to work in Israel and to earn a decent living. Were there workers going in daily into Egypt? No, because the Egyptians don't want Palestinians in their country. So the only solution is a regional one. But I'm afraid in this region, there are very few people who care about the Palestinians.
Okay.
Once again, let me know in the comments, is this true? That all of their neighbors and borders, they're shouting out that they support the Palestinians, but they're not opening their borders to the Palestinians. A little bit like virtual signaling, I guess. And I think I agree with Douglas. All of those players around the outside of Israel and Palestine, they have a hugely important role. Now, some of them are influencing Hamas by supplying them weapons and finances. And unfortunately, the Palestinian people, they're the ones that suffer because all that money is going towards weapons, or that aid is going towards, building up their weapons, building tunnels and things like that. Anyway.
Douglas, you had the first word. Cenk, I'll give you the last one. I want to preface it by saying that it's been reported today, and this is coming from Hamas's statements, apparently, picked up by newspapers in America, that there was a new hostage deal offered, which was that Hamas were asked, will you release the 40 women and children you still have captive in return for a week-long ceasefire? And they apparently have rejected that. So I think that when we talk about behavior on both sides, the mere fact that there are still 40 women and children in the clutches of Hamas, and God knows what they're doing to those poor women, that should be noted too. There are still innocent people being held in the most appalling conditions by Hamas, and that is also motivating Israel's response. But
Right.
I'll give you the last word, Cenk.
Yeah. So I wish to God that they would release those women and children. I think it's immoral to keep them. It's wrong in every way. But Israel kills more than 40 women and children every single day, all completely innocent. Look, even if you take IDF's outlandish numbers of 7,000 Hamas fighters killed, that means their kill ratio of civilians to fighters is still worse than Hamas's. And they have now killed 20 times the number of civilians that Hamas has killed. So when Douglas talks about driving them into Egypt or Jordan, that's just ethnic cleansing. They live in Gaza. So if you push them out and they say, well, you're all Arabs anyway, why don't you just go live somewhere else in the region? That's the definition of ethnic cleansing. That is outrageous. And he says it with blithely, with no concern, because Palestinian lives don't matter. And you ask them, hey, how many Palestinians can you possibly kill? And he never answered the question. So the reality is you cannot kill your way out of this conflict. The more that they kill, the more, what do you think that the Palestinians are going to feel? What would you feel if your family was butchered, if their heads were crushed by a bomb that was dropped on a building, if they were lit on fire by the bombs that were dropped? What would you do? You'd fight back the rest of your life. And then they are permanently occupied. And now Netanyahu says he was proud that he prevented a Palestinian state and that he will continue to prevent a Palestinian state. He is not a partner for peace, or he profits from war. His whole career is about perpetuating war, not just to murder Palestinians, but it keeps Israel unsafe for eternity. So the whole point of Israel is to be a safe haven for oppressed Jews throughout the world. It cannot be a safe haven as long as you're imprisoning 5 million Palestinians and saying, we are never, ever going to let you go. And if you ever dare oppose us, we will kill your women and children. It's disgusting.
They're not in prison.
It's not what Israel was meant to do.
I'd urge you again, Cenk. Leave your bedroom sometime and come to this region and see it for yourself.
Hey, I thought I was supposed to get the last word. This idiot's talking about bedrooms.
The Palestinians
hey, do you care about the babies? Do you care about the women? Douglas, why don't you admit you don't care about dead Palestinian babies, dead Palestinian women, because you don't mind it? Israel, you say right or wrong, no matter how many people they have murdered, no matter how many kids they have crushed to death, you don't care because you don't care about human beings. All you want is some sort of warmongering, Israeli state, U.S. state, etc.
All right, listen. I've got to wrap it up. I've got to say, listen, I think we actually had a very I found
You're
it
super evil. You don't mind the deaths of all those thousands of people.
Let's not descend.
Warmongering.
Jake, let's not descend into this. I actually think with a few exceptions, we had a good debate there, right? I understand passions run high. I think it's a shame whenever I do these debates when it gets ad hominem in the way that it has occasionally tonight. But I do think we've also had some really smart takes from both sides about what is going on and where we need to get to. I think we can all agree on one thing. We all want to end up with peace here somehow. It's going to be horrendously difficult.
We do.
It's very complicated.
That's not true.
But I do think I don't actually think, knowing both of you as I do, I don't believe the charge that neither of you care is true. I think you do care about all the lives that are being lost.
It's just a lazy smear.
And I think that we should start from an acceptance we all care and then try and be more constructive. But listen, I thank you both for joining me.
Now, I agree with Pierce at the end there, actually. I think it's a very emotive subject, war. And they're both, I guess, passionate on their perspectives. Now, I don't have a dog in this fight. I know nothing about this conflict. I guess I'm learning a little bit more by listening to this debate. It was quite interesting because this is probably the best behaved I've ever seen Cenk behave. And Douglas Murray threw a few, I think, out of character ad hominem attacks there. Now, Cenk did that as well, but that's because I expected from him. I'm surprised he didn't throw even more. Now, I think that they both care deeply about innocent civilian lives, and I think we all do. I think the problem is with Palestine is they have Hamas as the leaders, and the attacks that they carried out against Israel, who they know has a stronger army, they have a lot more resources. Surely they knew that there was an imminent attack coming. Now, like I said, I'm not coming at it from the Palestine or Palestinian perspective or the Israeli perspective. I'm looking from the outside in. And if the Jews were there more than 2,000 years ago and, they went and came back or whatever, that's normal in human history that people, they win land, they lose land. They win it back, they lose it. Those are the spoils, I guess, of war. Now, I would much rather see Hamas and the Palestinians concentrate on, family, education, etc., rather than investing in wars and things like that. I think there'd be far more compassion towards them. And I'm not going to make a call whether Israel's justified in their response. I guess because if someone attacked my family, I don't think I could tell you that my response is going to be the same as the attack. Now, like I said, there is absolutely no winners in war. Everybody loses. Just one side loses more than the other. Now, I'm sure you're going to have plenty of comments in the comment section, and I'm looking forward to actually learning a little bit more, and I'm sure there'll be some comments that will help me on this journey of learning a little bit more about this conflict. And let me just say thanks for tuning in. Don't forget to like, share, subscribe, and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on any of my videos, and I'll catch you in the next one.